Hey everyone! So when it comes to wave control, most experienced players think they know it all. League has been around for quite a while and the way minions work hasn't changed that much over the years. Most of the fundamentals have remained the same. However, here at skillcapped we're known for teaching the most advanced concepts that nobody knows about, so when we decided to make a wave management guide, instead of teaching you something that's already been taught 100 times, we've compiled a list of the top 8 wave control tricks that you won't find anywhere else. As a disclaimer, this guide is for those who know the fundamentals of wave management already, such as pushing, freezing, bouncing, and so on. And be sure to stick around until the end, because the last one is something that you don't want to miss. Let's get started. Our very first tip is something that only very few professional players are starting to actively use, which is to check minion buffs. A couple of our latest videos have featured this minion buffing formula. Basically, if you're higher level or have more towers in a specific lane, your minions get stronger than your opponent's minions. This is information you can't forget, because it literally changes how you manage your waves entirely. For example, let's say it's 25 minutes into the game and there's a completely neutral wave in bot lane. If your team has the turret and level advantage, then your wave is going to slow push into the enemy. You could potentially use that knowledge to pressure around Baron while a slow push builds in the bot lane, pressuring the enemy tower. This can be a bit confusing, and while you should have an approximate idea of how much stronger your own minions are, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to calculate in your head. What if you have a tower lead but your opponent happens to have 2 levels higher than you, whose minions are stronger then? Thankfully, Riot added a buff tracker on the minions themselves. As Miss Fortune recalls, she realizes that her wave is in a tricky spot. To decide what to do next, she clicks her own minions. On the top there, we can see that her minions do 5% bonus damage to minions and take 1 reduced damage from minions. Typically, with the even minion rule, the wave would push into Miss Fortune's side because the waves are crashed closer to the enemy's side. But because her own wave is stronger, by the time she recalls and walks back down there, her wave would have pushed far into enemy territory. Not only would she have nothing to farm, but the enemy ADC would pick up a huge wave of their own. That's why Miss Fortune immediately bolts towards bot lane. Instead of missing all this farm, she quickly clears the wave, crashing them into the enemy tower before retreating to safety. By understanding minion buffs, instead of losing a ton of farm and falling behind, she gets all of her CS while also denying the enemy ADC's farm as it dies to the tower. Next up, we have number 2, the teleport freeze. Our second tip is using your teleport to set up freezes. To do this, you need 2 neutral waves. Take a look at Vi. She's going to clear these minions before her wave crashes into the tower. This means that both waves are going to crash in the middle, in a completely neutral state. Should this happen, it's complete RNG as to whether it'll freeze for you or push towards your opponent. What you can do is teleport to a cannon minion or a caster minion if a cannon isn't present. This causes a momentary minion disadvantage for your side, resulting in the enemy wave pushing towards you for a freeze. This is especially useful if you know that your jungler is on the top side of the map. Now that he's guaranteed a freeze, Ryze immediately calls for his jungler to come, knowing that Cho'Gath will eventually be in a bad spot. Olaf thankfully listens, and the gank is super easy. We just want to point out that the wave was still in the middle of the lane, so this tactic wasn't the main reason why this kill was acquired. Just keep in mind that junglers can sometimes take a bit longer to get to lane. The wave was guaranteed to freeze, so even if Olaf did an extra camp or 2, then the wave would be around here, still leading to a kill. For number 3, we have the cheater recall. A cheater recall is when you set up a base timing without losing anything for it. This works best on the 3rd minion wave of the game, which is a cannon wave. The idea is that you push a cannon wave into the enemy tower, then recall, and come back to lane while your opponent is stuck in lane clearing minions. This will give you the item advantage without losing a single thing. The steps that you want to take to achieve a cheater recall is to first acquire a minion advantage within the first 2 waves. 2 to 3 minions will do the trick. When the 3rd wave comes in, you'll want to use your wave advantage to hard crash or slow push into the enemy tower, enabling you to recall. This is strongest on the 3rd wave because your opponent isn't strong enough to clear the wave under their tower quickly enough to punish you for it, so now they're literally just stuck in lane. As we can see, our Yasuo acquires a 4 minion advantage as the cannon wave arrives, he completely ignores Malphite and shoves the wave to the enemy tower. Malphite now spends the next 43 seconds last hitting, while Yasuo has walked all the way back with a 2nd Doran's Blade. The trade-off? Yasuo has only lost 3 melee minions. Once he equalizes levels, he uses his item advantage to force flash and set up a freeze. The free recall for an extra item in lane is part of why it's been tagged as a cheat, but the other element to this is how you can literally trade your health bar to achieve this outcome. In this example, we see Talia apply a cheater recall against a challenger Sylas. She doesn't care about getting out-traded whatsoever so long as she shoves the third wave, which gives her a free recall into a roam while Sylas is stuck in lane. For number 4, we have abusing aggro to push. It's common knowledge that having more minions than your opponent allows you to win trades. We also know the first 3 levels can decide a lane outcome, as an experience lead leads into literally having an extra ability over your opponent. The trick here is to quickly gain a minion lead without actually hitting the enemy minions to begin with. Instead, you can attack the enemy champion. What this will do is aggro all of their minions onto yourself while your minions are still hitting the opposing wave, which will give you a push lead. This may seem small, and it kind of is, but once you've acquired the push advantage, if you hold onto it by continuing to hit the wave thereafter, you will get the push advantage and experience lead. To illustrate this in a real game, we can see our Kayle use E onto Aurelia. This aggroes their minions, causing them to all fire into the Kayle, while her wave is still hitting the enemy red wave. Kayle then maintains this minion advantage into level 2, winning an early trade against Aurelia, which as we all know should not happen early on, and this was without even getting a level up. Here's another example we got from the vault, where our Aurelia went into Q onto Aatrox, auto-attacked him once, and walked away to snag a minion advantage. She then translated that into winning the race to level 2, netting her a free kill. This trick is mostly viable at level 1 in top and mid lane, so keep that in mind when you're looking for wave control. For number 5, we have the high IQ freeze denial. When your wave control mastery gets to the highest level, you can start to do things nobody else would think of to drastically change the outcome of the lane. This trick is one that we've seen from the highest level players like Someday. Let's play it out and then break it down. What Someday did was identify that his wave would not crash into the enemy tower in time and instead would meet like this. This is super obnoxious to deal with, especially for melee champions that can't clear those ranged casters without tanking the tower to crash the wave quickly enough while it's in this spot. With Someday on the clock before his opponent returns, he knows that he can move straight into the tower and drag the enemy wave away, allowing his own wave to crash into the tower cleanly. Now he can recall while it pushes back into him. This denies any freeze potential from the enemy Vayne, and Someday scores some massive style points by flexing his wave knowledge. And for you support players out there who love to please your ADCs, you can look to do this yourselves when you find the opportunity. After clearing up the double kill, Lulu goes a step further and applies the same freeze denial, hard carrying this lane phase for her Vayne. For number 6, we have mirrored wave formations. Our next tip is simple, but an important one that leads into some more advanced wave tactics, which is why we're covering it briefly. This tip is to always remember that waves are mirrored on both sides, so you can always tell when the next enemy wave is coming in. Let's take a look at a quick example of the tip being used. This game, Malzahar is running low on mana and has a ton of gold that he wants to spend. Ideally, he gets a recall off soon. The problem is that he only has enough mana for one full spell rotation. Knowing this, he notices his next wave is coming in. Instead of wasting any mana on this wave, he instead tanks it and waits for the incoming wave to crash. Once it does, that's when he blows all of his mana on it and clears both waves. By understanding a simple concept, Malzahar was able to get off a completely clean recall. We bring this up because it's something that we often see players not exploit to the fullest advantage. For example, in our recent Challenger Earpiece guide, there was a point where the subscriber we were coaching missed a kill on the enemy ADC in bot lane. Had he been aware that waves are mirrored, he would have known that he could chase the Sivir by dashing onto the wave and closing the gap. Using this simple tip also enabled the teleport freeze to be used along with Someday's freeze denial, so we had to include it in this guide. Our 7th tip is using minions to get a faster recall off. Back to the previous Yasuo game, he had eventually managed to use the small lead that he got from his cheater recall to score a kill onto the enemy Malphite. The natural response after killing your opponent is to obviously push the wave, get some plates, and quickly reset afterwards. Notice what he does. Instead of hitting the tower until the tower plates fall, Yasuo instead begins channeling his recall and allows his minions to finish the job. Compare this to players that normally fully kill the tower plate and then retreat to recall in the lane brush. That's around 10 seconds saved of game time. It may not seem like much, but you can do a lot with 10 seconds. Depending on how much extra time you have, you could potentially recall and get a roam off in mid before having to go back to top lane, or do Gromp or Krugs on your way back to lane with your extra time. League is a game of seconds, and knowing when you can use minions to save yourself valuable time is a powerful tactic to always be aware of. For For number 8, we have a tip that you'll be kicking yourself for not using already if you play bot. But it's also super helpful in other lanes, which we'll explain in a moment. You'll be using Minion Aggro to check for vision in a brush without having to use a sweeper or a control ward. When a wave is coming in, all you have to do is sit in a brush to check if the enemy has warded it. In this case, Annie sits in the side brush and the wave walks right past her. If it was warded, the minion would have stopped to attack her. She now knows that she doesn't have to use any type of vision denial on this bush. And Annie knows that Soraka is oblivious to her being in the brush, which allows her to set up a free kill when Soraka walks up. So how can this work in other lanes? Well, sometimes you'll find yourself with the opportunity to drag a minion wave into the side brush, which is a warding hotspot. If the minions de-aggro as you enter the brush, then you can place your control ward in another brush instead. If you communicate to your jungler that the enemy has no vision in either brush, it can set up some easy ganks. This ward checking trick also works for mid lane as well, so it's applicable for every role. By the way, we released some crazy guides over at skillcapped, which are exclusive only to our subscribers. We have over 800 guides covering everything you need to know to rapidly improve. We also send our challengers into Elo Hell every week to see how they climb out of the most extreme scenarios with the worst teammates imaginable. All wrapped up into courses that you can watch right away. Oh, and if you don't significantly improve while using skillcapped, you get a full refund. So, what are you waiting for? Sign up today and escape Elo Hell. And that brings us to the end of this guide. Which of these tricks are you excited to try the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll catch you in the next guide.